Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to my October 2025 Reading Journal Wrap-Up. This video is coming out a little bit later than I wanted it to, and it's because my end of October/early November has been busier than I expected it to be. In Canada, we celebrate Thanksgiving in October, so there was that. There was Halloween, and my brother brought his dog to my parents' house, and she wore a hot dog costume, and my cat Benny was a chef. My whole family is currently in Spain on vacation, so I'm at home watching my brother's dog for 2 weeks, so I've been up earlier than normal and walking her a lot, so I'm finding myself more tired than usual. And I also completed my first half marathon at the beginning of November, so I spent a lot of time in October doing last-minute training. So things have just been quite busy, and unfortunately my journal has taken a bit of a back seat, but better late than never. I also think I'm in a bit of a reading slump right now, and I believe it's because I'm stressing myself out over the books I still want to read this year. I think I've sort of decided that I'm not going to complete my TBR this year, which is frustrating because I made it short so it was more attainable, but I think I want to try and ensure that I also complete some of my other reading resolutions this year, and only reading my TBR won't allow me to do that. So as of me posting this video, I haven't finished any books yet in November, but I'm slowly making my way through a couple, so I'm not too concerned. But my October reading plan did not turn out to be quite as successful as I wanted it to be. I had planned on reading around 6 books, and I only ended up reading 3. I'm satisfied with the ones I did get around to because 2 of them worked to satisfy some of my goals, but I think I'm just entering a slower period, and that's totally fine. I'm trying to prioritize some books that I started in October but didn't finish, because at least I've got a bit of a head start on them. But I know things will pick up a bit as the year finishes off, and I'm happy with that. I'm starting off with my monthly cover page. I'm using a spooky autumnal sticker sheet from Artimation Co. as the base for my spread. I've been using their sticker sheets for all of my cover pages this year, and while I think it's been good practice for my collaging skills, I've noticed that this is my least favorite part of each setup, so I'm working to make some changes for next year's journal. The quote I'm including this month is from To Clutch a Razor by Veronica Roth, which I read last month. I'm using a few different washi tapes for this spread as well. The tape with the pumpkins and the leaves is from Marigona Suli Art, the orange grid is from Ikigai Papier, and the bone tape is from Journal Say. I'm also using a circular leaf stamp from Michaels to create labels for this spread on the right. And with that, we can get started on the book review spreads. The first book I read in October was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. I've been making my way through this series again over this year, and it's been so much fun revisiting these books and the characters because I absolutely love them. It is odd because the Raven cycle represents a lot of things I don't normally read anymore. I don't read much YA, and when I read fantasy, I'm more drawn to harder magic systems and political conflict. But this series is sort of the antithesis of that, and yet I love it. And I read it for the first time when I was 20, so it's not like there's a nostalgic reason to it. I just love the world of these books and the characters in it. It's pretty hard to describe what this book is about because it's the final book in a series, but essentially the quest to find the dead Welsh King Glendower that our characters have been on is finally coming to an end. However, a demon has been awoken and it threatens the lives of everyone in its wake. With multiple lives on the line, the teens seek to alter their fates as soon as possible to avoid destruction. Of all the books in this series, I feel like this one really showcases the payoff of the characters' development. They've gone through so much leading up to this 4th book, and I feel like you finally get to see everyone at their best. I also find this book to be the most emotional in the series. I didn't cry this time around, but I did cry the last time I read this book, but I still felt the feels during this read. There are some really beautiful moments in this book, particularly during Ronan chapters. Something I always miss in book 3 is Ronan POV. I love the way he sees the world and his friends, so I love being able to get back into his head again. I've made a point of discussing the antagonists of this series as I go through each book, and this time we have the 3 French dream dealers Laumonier. Laumonier is by far my least favorite of the antagonists in this series. I just find that they don't have any good motivation to be doing any of the things they're doing. And if anything, I think their motivations are too similar to the villain from book 3, so they feel less unique. I don't find them to be very threatening or interesting. There's 3 of them, and yet they're very bland. Piper also becomes a primary antagonist in this book, but I don't really like her either. I find her to be really juvenile, and I always read her dialogue in my head with a Valley Girl accent because that's just how she comes across to me. But despite not really liking the antagonists, I'm not that upset about them because I don't believe that they're supposed to be that important. The demon is clearly the most threatening thing to the group, and the others are only around to keep the demon going. I don't normally talk about spoilers in my voiceovers because I don't want to ruin someone else's experience of a book if they're also planning on reading it, but I wanted to quickly talk about the end of this book because I interpreted it differently this time around, and I wanted to hear from others who have read it to see if you have similar or different thoughts. There's a spoiler text on the screen now that will go away when I'm finished. So at the end of this book, the character Noah reveals that he was the one who whispered to Gansey all of those years ago on the ley line about Glendower saving him. Because Noah died on the ley line and has access to being present in different moments in time, I always thought that he waited until Gansey found Glendower, and then using his ability to jump back and forth in time, visited Glendower's tomb the day of Gansey's first death and used the favor to save Gansey's life. And that's why Glendower is completely dead when the group finds him. But when I read the book this time, I feel like that's not what happened. It seems like it was actually the power of the ley line itself that saved Gansey, and Noah lied about Glendower in order to get Gansey to follow the path of life that would allow him to receive a third chance at life. So to me, it seems that Gansey's whole pursuit is built on a complete lie. And I think I prefer my original interpretation because it makes the existence of Glendower more important and not just a MacGuffin, a plot device that gets characters to do something but ultimately has no purpose in the story. I'd never considered that Glendower could be a MacGuffin because I always thought the favor was used by Noah, giving him purpose. But I'd be really curious to know what you think if you've also read The Raven King, because maybe I interpreted the story totally wrong the first time, and that's okay. For the decoration, I used a black and white witchy sticker sheet from Mary Ann Sew on Etsy. I also used 2 stickers of girls with horns from an Etsy seller called Astray. And all of the washi tapes were from Hobby Lobby. I tried to copy the font used on the book cover as I've been doing with all of my review spreads for the Raven cycle this year. I traced the titles for the first 2 books, and I really don't like how they turned out, so I've just been eyeballing it for the 3rd and 4th books, and while it isn't perfect, I think it's good enough. I've had a really great time revisiting this series, and I think I'll probably reread the Dreamer trilogy next year because I've only read it once. But The Raven King will always make me very happy to read it, so I gave it 5 stars. I'd definitely recommend this series if you're into magical realism and found family.
Oh!
You can't get
No! Literally killed Kiki.
The second book I read was The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. I read Interview with the Vampire 3 years ago and really enjoyed it. I actually found myself surprised by how much I liked it. I think it would be a great novel to study or to read for a book club because there are so many interesting conversations that it engages with to spark conversation. But despite enjoying it, I initially didn't think I would ever continue on in the Vampire Chronicles because it's a really long series, and I know that the entire series doesn't always follow the characters featured in book 1, and I wasn't all that interested in reading about new people. However, there was a TV adaptation of Interview with the Vampire that started a couple years ago, and after I started watching it, it reignited my interest in the book and made me curious about the sequel. So I finally decided to give it a try in October because it just felt right for the season. This book is a sequel but acts mostly as a prequel to Interview with the Vampire. After Louis's interview is published, Lestat decides to write his own story. The book recounts the memoir of Lestat de Liancourt and his life as a human in 18th century France and the circumstances that lead him to becoming a vampire. Lestat's life is filled with theater, music, rebellion, danger, and fantasy. We see how his life and choices impacted things in Louis's life and how the greater world of vampires exists. Lestat becomes a rock star in the 1980s, and we learn how everything in his life leads him to this point. I'll be honest, this was not the book that I was expecting it to be. The description on the back of the book clearly describes Lestat as an 80s rock star, and I was really excited to focus on 1980s Lestat. I do think Interview can be read as a standalone, but it does end in a way that opens up potential for Lestat. So I assumed that this entire book was going to take place after the events of Interview, but I was mistaken. Lots of this book does take place in the 80s, it's just the 1780s. And even though it wasn't what I was expecting, I'm not upset at what it was. Lestat was my favorite character from Interview, so I was really intrigued to learn more about his origin story and life before Louis. It was really nice to see some of the crossover between books. Lestat doesn't spend too much time talking about his experiences with Louis. This is a critique I have about the book. I wish we could have seen more of Lestat's perspective on some of the events from book 1, but I appreciated the crossovers, like with the Vampire Theater and the Vampire Armand. I also found it very intentional that this book was a memoir and not an interview like the first book, because I think it works to reveal information about Lestat. To me, Louis told his story as a way to alleviate some of the guilt of his life, while also working to take down the other vampires at the same time. Louis seems very honest about his mistakes and shares his life from a place of genuine reflection. But Lestat, on the other hand, writing a memoir, feels very self-centered. He wrote it as a response to Louis's interview, and I do think it was an attempt to be self-serving. And I'm not surprised that I feel this way. The version of Lestat that Louis talks about seems like someone who would do something like that. And something that I noticed while reading this book was that I didn't really believe Lestat. I never questioned the events in Louis's interview because I trusted him, but I don't think that I trust Lestat. There are a lot of moments in this book where Lestat is framed as an incredible person, gaining the affections of everyone and almost being perceived as a chosen one. Obviously, everything could be true, but I'd like to think that the idea is open for possibility. There's a really strange relationship dynamic between Lestat and a character named Gabrielle in this book. Anne Rice included a weird relationship moment in the first book with Louis and Claudia, so I guess I'm not that surprised that there's another strange situation happening here too. But unlike the first book where I could understand it to a degree, I'm not really sure that I get this one. It just seems really inappropriate to me. I thought Gabrielle was an interesting character and acted as a good counter to Lestat, but their dynamic was just really odd. Another thing I didn't love about the book was an entire section towards the end detailing the life of a different vampire named Marius. I believe this section is being used to set up the next book in the series, but I didn't find Marius to be an important enough character to this book. The things that Lestat learns from him probably could have been summarized in a shorter period of time. There's a similar section earlier where we get the backstory of Armand, but I didn't mind this as much because we knew Armand from the first book, and his life intersects with both Louis and Lestat. But I didn't care as much about Marius or the things he spoke about, so I felt like this section dragged on a bit. I used a few pieces of stationery from Mary Gonasuli art for this spread. I used one of her pink flower washi tapes and some stickers from her Magical Beings sticker sheet. There was a vampire girl on the sticker sheet, so it seemed fitting for a vampire book. The pink grid washi tape is from my local dollar store, and the pink scrapbook paper is from Michael's. Overall though, I enjoyed this book. I really liked Lestat's voice. The way Anne Rice captures him through the prose is done so well. I would say that Lestat is still my favorite character from this franchise, but I don't see myself continuing this series. I ended up giving the Vampire Lestat 4 stars. I think the only way I would continue the series is if the TV show continues into book 3, then I will reconsider. And the last book I read in October was The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. One of my reading goals for 2025 is to read books by authors from countries I've never read from before. I didn't have this book on my radar at first, but I was looking into some potential horror books to read in October, and I came across this one. And the author is from Malaysia, which is a country I've never read from before, and it was a novella, so I decided to give this one a go. I'll be honest, this book is a bit hard to describe. After finishing it, I watched a few videos of other people's reviews and was glad to see that others also had a difficult time trying to explain this book. But the story is a fairy tale that sort of acts like a dark sequel to Disney's version of The Little Mermaid. It follows a mute mermaid living on land who wanders through a war-struck world alongside a plague doctor. In her past, the mermaid married the king and had 2 mermaid human children. However, her husband cut out her tongue, causing her to lose the ability to speak, and her daughters became ravenous, killing their father and wreaking havoc over the land. So the mermaid and the plague doctor travel together, ultimately crossing paths with a mysterious colony of people who seem to follow some questionable and violent practices. I don't want to say much more than this because the story is short, and if you're interested in checking it out, I think it's probably best to go into this one knowing less. I would describe this book as strange and confusing, but likable. My favorite part of this book was the relationship between the mermaid and the plague doctor. They have only recently met, but I think their bond works well. They are both reserved at first, but as things unfold, they learn to develop trust in each other. It's nice to see this because it's clear that the mermaid doesn't really have anyone in her corner, and so finding the plague doctor is like a saving grace for her. The doctor is also beneficial because they are directly involved in the conversation this book engages with on women's autonomy and voice. The book presents men and women as ferocious beings, but the mermaid has had her autonomy stripped. Through the journey, it's really great to see how this relationship helps rebuild active choice and power. Unfortunately, I don't think this book is perfect. There are many moments that I found to be quite confusing. The activities described in the colony are a bit confusing at times, and so is the circumstance that places the 2 main characters together. Khaw just kind of throws you into the story with little context, and you have to pick it up as you go. The writing style is also very particular, and unfortunately it didn't really work for me. The writing is very purple and extremely flowery. I do think that it worked for the mermaid's character because I buy into the idea that she actually speaks like this, but the writing is so lyrical that it's sometimes distracting because it's hard to follow. I think people who enjoy purple prose may have an appreciation for the writing style, but it didn't work for me. I also wish that the daughters had played a bigger role in the story. I found the little info we got about them to be quite interesting, and so I wanted to see more of them in the forefront, but unfortunately that didn't happen. That's less of a critique though, and more of a personal wish. For this spread, I used a mermaid sticker sheet from Ikigai Papier. The sticker sheet was from her 2024 bullet journal bundle, and even though the mermaid on the sticker sheet looks much happier than the mermaid in this book, I felt like I had to use it for this book. I'm also impressed that I was able to make all of the spreads this month match their books a little bit. That doesn't happen very often. I don't go out of my way to acquire stationery that will match every book I read, but if I have something that I think will work, I'll use it, and this month it worked out really well. I also used a wave washi tape from Notebook Therapy's Gentle Giant collection and a blue grid washi tape from Hobby Lobby. In the end, I liked this book, but I wouldn't say that it's my favorite thing ever. It had a combination of things I liked and disliked, so I gave The Salt Grows Heavy 3 stars. I liked the story of this book, but wasn't really happy with the execution. And that is it for my October reading journal wrap-up. I didn't read as many books as I wanted to, but I still think October was a good month. I'm feeling hopeful for November, but we'll just have to see how it goes. And I also wanted to mention that I have officially started working on my 2026 reading journal, so look forward to that in the near future. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.